Welcome to Next in Tech, an S&P Global Market Intelligence podcast where the world of emerging tech lives. I'm your host, Eric Hanselman, Chief Analyst for Technology, Media, and Telecom at S&P Global Market Intelligence. And today, we're going to be talking about what's going on in the Metaverse. And to discuss it with me, I've got returning guests, Ian Hughes and Neil Barbour. Welcome back to the podcast to you both.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
Thanks, Eric.
So you are both off some Metaverse-related travel. There's a lot of research that's going on. I guess maybe start with some of the research pieces. Neil, you're working on some revenue forecasts for Metaverse. I'm curious, what is it you're seeing? And give us a little background on.
Yeah, that's right, Eric. So we're sort of looking at the Metaverse coming out of a disillusionment trough, coming out of the surge in revenue that we saw during the pandemic. So headset sales were up. There were a lot of Metaverse-leaning experiences that grew over the pandemic, including Roblox, and Fortnite did okay for itself. At the same time, we also saw the industrial and enterprise-leaning Metaverse experiences and hardware and solutions. Those started to ramp as well. At around 2022, some of the air started to come out of that market. There was some over-promising and under-delivering across the stack. But in 2023, we're starting to see some more technologies come online. You know, we're looking specifically at the Apple Vision Pro, and as I'm sure we'll talk later, a lot of the new companies and ideas and solutions coming out of Augmented World Expo. So we're kind of back on track for a pretty steep growth curve for the Metaverse revenue segment over the next 5 years. And again, we're tracking that quarter to quarter. So we're already seeing some of that come to life on the ground in the early 2024, and moving forward, there's still potential for that to realize.
So rumors of the death of the Metaverse were exaggerated, huh?
Sure, so to speak. I mean, it's a slow, steady climb, but there's still plenty of road to run here.
Well, and I guess it's one of those things that we've talked about on previous episodes, which is the fact that there's, while you talked about, a certain amount of disillusionment that was out there, some of the heady promises, I think we're now getting in some circles where avatars actually have legs now, and some of the, I guess, maturing parts of different parts of this. But there's so much that's going on outside of what I think is the piece that people tend to sort of jump to when talking about Metaverse, which is the full, simulated existence. And in fact, there are so many practical uses that are taking place now. And of course, you mentioned you were at Augmented Reality World. It seems like this was the point at which you really got to see, who's back in, what's taking place. The fact that you've got a conference, that attendance was up, a lot of people were there. Maybe we should dive into what you all saw there and what your impressions were.
Yeah, sure. So Augmented World Expo has been going on for 15 years now. So again, this, as you said, Metaverse is dead. It's not. It's been there for a very long while in all sorts of shapes and sizes. And one of the interesting things, more so than ever this year at this event, was that there was a focus on the history of this, because constantly we have this the peaks and troughs, and quite often at the peak, everyone in the peak kind of forgets all the things that happened before. You get all this is the first X to do Y type thing happening. But this year they were inducting 101 Hall of Famers, with people going way back into the 60s and things like that had worked and developed and changed the way that we might be able to interact and can interact with data and with one another. So it's very, whether you use the Metaverse word or not, having people like Professor Tom Furness, who's known as the godfather of VR, he started work on heads-up displays in fighter pilot cockpits. He kind of started that one way and another, and then moved to trying to understand how to re-represent all the complexity of information you have on a massive set of dials in a fighter pilot while you're mostly unconscious, as he said, when you're flying at high G, but trying to give the pilot the right information that works for their brain, not the other way around, not here's a bunch of dials, learn them. And his entire lineage has now got moved from the military to actually I mean, he started loads of companies, done loads of unusual things, but looking to how all this tech that we've got and all these advances we've got can improve us and improve humanity. So he talked about human interfaces, but humane interfaces, and considering people. And that's, I probably mentioned that lots of times before, that all this stuff is about people. So having that lineage and people from then willing to put up with everyone saying we've done this for the first time when they haven't, but trying to remind everyone there's a huge, great family of things going on.
We have been doing this for a while, and there are lessons that hopefully will follow through. But I think that the point that you made about humane interfaces is so fundamental to a lot of what we've been thinking about. I mean, as we've discussed, a lot of this transition to Metaverse is that it's got the ability to be an environment in which you can present information in ways that winds up being more useful for people, and being able to, whether or not that happens to be pilots flying planes, being able to get the right information in the right format in ways that people can leverage it, use it, and work with it effectively.
Yeah, we really saw the rubber hit the road on that for a number of companies on the show floor. I'm thinking particularly of Qualcomm, NTT, XReal, sort of transitioning what has been a VR headset focused market, particularly, thinking of the hardware exclusively, not necessarily the software side, but putting a big, heavy, hot, power hungry VR device on your head and taking that and moving it more toward the smart glasses division, something that rests easily on your ears and nose and gives you more digestible heads-up display kind of information instead of sort of immersing you in this other world. And I think a lot of market observers, myself included, have seen this as the end goal of the VR, the AR VR phase. Perhaps maybe we're in a more exploratory VR phase where we're sort of learning the nuts and bolts of what it is to interact in a virtual space, and then maybe stripping away a lot of the VR parts where the AR parts remain. And that's where you see the glasses potentially become a smartphone replacement over not a 5-year story, but maybe over a 10, 15-year story. But on the show floor, we saw a lot of advancements and waveguide and integrations with machine learning and Gen AI technology to deliver on the kind of promises that have been made in the smart glasses space for decades now.
It's interesting. I mean, you mentioned Qualcomm, and it seems like we're now into this area in which a lot of the technologies that have been leveraged for smartphones, a lot of the high performance rendering capabilities. So companies like Qualcomm, MediaTek, maybe to a lesser degree Intel, are now starting to turn up in ways that you're now integrating a lot of that what had been the smartphone capabilities into something that's a little more lightweight, wearables in their various forms.
Yeah, and I think that's why Qualcomm's name kind of rises to the top here in a lot of cases, because of their ARM-based infrastructure and how they're very power conscious. That is to say that of the Snapdragon processors, their key advantage in the market is how power efficient they are. And so that's really important in the smart glasses space, where you're not going to have a lot of room to hide a battery. So the battery's going to be smaller. You're going to, particularly if the smart glasses are going to be your main device throughout the day, you're going to need arguably more battery than you would in your phone, because they're up and they're working all the time. But there are definitely other companies in play here as well. As you said, the MediaTek and Intel, NVIDIA certainly isn't done with this race. They're still involved at the edges of some of these headsets being installed directly into them to power the graphics inside of these and some of the more advanced headsets. What we're kind of seeing right now too is that a lot of devices that are forward-looking are sharing power with a phone. So you have half the rendering done perhaps on the glasses and half on the phone. That's not great. First of all, for true portability, if you potentially your phone's in your pocket all the time, but maybe it's not. It's also not good for the phone's battery life. So you don't want to be sacrificing one device's power for another. One of the interesting solutions we found to that problem on the floor is XReal started producing a phone-sized tablet that would power its smart glasses exclusively. The trade-off there is now you're carrying two phones around, ostensibly carrying two phones around your pocket all day long.
Phone and a tablet. Well, but it does get into that question of sort of the rendering power that's necessary and what, or just like computational power in general necessary. I bring up MediaTek because there was a lot of discussion about the latest their latest device and the fact that they went with larger sized ARM cores, in their multi-core product. And it really is one of these things where if you think about what that, the kind of horsepower that we're now expecting our devices to have, that's one of those things that we're getting into a point at which when you start dropping whatever the heck AI means and all of this into this, again, more computational work, more power, more capability that's got to be dropped into this as well. I'm sure you saw no small amount of AI when you were out in Long Beach as well.
There was a lot of AI, obviously. That's a thing.
Strangely enough.
But I think just on that rendering power piece, there's also a lot more things that are about cloud streaming content to whatever device. So that's stuff NVIDIA have been doing. So you don't need the device. You need a screen and a communication channel. And HoloLight has created a cloud streaming rendering service for kind of heavy duty engineering models, because the complexity of the things that you're trying to render in industrial space, for instance, whether it's on a headset or on a screen or whatever, has typically required some high-end desktop or to power that stuff and an expensive graphics card. And instead, they render it on the cloud and stream it to you. And so do the management of that. So you actually get the full beans engineering model delivered to you. And we're seeing a lot of those things. And of course, then there's also the potential for AI on not just on your device, but the AI in the environment that you're streaming from to be able to do even more with the things that it's sending to you. And that's some of the things we see, that kind of blended piece that this is proper distributed computing. It's not just on the device and it's not just on the cloud.
And it starts to get to overcome somewhat historically, cloud-based rendering. The challenge is that you had all those laws of physics problems of, if the rendering is taking place where there is, it takes a long time for the photons to actually get there, you get lag. But now we've got, widely dispersed enough and well-connected enough computational capacity. In fact, we're starting to overcome some of those issues around latency.
Yes, and you also have, again, going back to the device. The device has a degree of prediction on it as to what's coming next and what it's seeing. And for instance, in just general gaming rigs, the graphics card's rendering things that have never been sent to it. They're filling in the gaps to kind of keep the frame rate up. And I think this, I was going to say, we've been talking about the hardware, the whole software stack of things that are there to support the metaverse and the things that spin off from it was again maturing. And we saw a bunch of announcements at the show about kind of the next level of software engineering stack to build something. And it might be the Niantic's 8-wall kit that used to be a kind of like typing HTML into something, but now is a full WYSIWYG editor that looks, they all end up looking like Unity and Unreal, but they're about saying this is a spatial application and this piece is going to be here and we're going to size this and put this over here. Snapchat doing the same thing, Zappa doing a similar thing for WebXR. And there are all these rich toolkits to let you create some incredibly complex content. Not necessarily simply, but incredibly complex content to be delivered on whatever platform, whether it's one of the headsets or whether it's on your phone. And that level of maturity, they don't put that kind of investment in those tools unless there's a reason and people are going to use them and they need to attract the brands or attract the enterprises or, attract the consumers to do things with it.
Yeah, this has taken that step beyond what was some of those tools that had come out of gaming environments. So you mentioned Unreal World, Unity, some of those frameworks that started out in that environment to now get to that next stage of something that's a bit more general purpose, it sounds like.
Well, to some degree. Unreal and Unity also have tools for these spatial environments, and they're starting to support the USD format and things like that. But it was if you take Snapchat's there for a particular set of use cases, isn't it? And so understanding what a facial mesh is and how you're going to replace something and make an unusual mask or a quirky or quick app for somebody is one thing, or being able to deliver across all the WebXR browsers, which is sort of what Zappa were going for. That it's the level of intuitive tooling that then does all the complicated bits for you.
Right. I kind of took the glut of new development platforms as a sign that Unity and Unreal were not meeting the needs of AR, XR, VR developers, and that these are really drilling down into very special use cases. And so I think, I don't know, Ian, did you see a lot, you spent more time with that space than I did. Did you see a lot of the Gen AI story being told in these special purpose platforms?
It was certainly starting to. So particularly Snapchat, I think, was putting some significant effort into helping generate the content using some components Gen AI, but it was also kind of going back to what's on device, trying to do some diffusion modeling of live video and make changes based on that. So rather than at the moment, a lot of the stuff it's really a cut and paste over a piece of video. If you do something in Snapchat, or you have, it's a filter. So this next level of filter isn't just a filter; it's actually dynamically changing every single pixel at a very fast rate. I mean, they're trying to get faster and faster, but on the device. So if you want your film that you're shooting to look like Van Gogh, it will. If you want it to be cubist, it will. And so they're combining that kind of rendering technology, as well as a lot of these tools just inherently have kind of some sort of copilot or some sort of assistance thing. But it's obviously people like Roblox, they're busy talking about full-on Gen AI to build the entire experience. I say obviously, but that is what they're doing.
It seems like platforms like Roblox, and actually I want to give a shout out to the Metaverse Digest that you've been putting together. It sounds like you've got a set of folks who are heading towards some of these environments where they've got, complex tools and environments. Some, though, that are going to platforms like a Robloxy kind of thing, and starting to go with some pretty mainstream organizations that are starting to leverage these environments. A lot of the likes of a Walmart.
Absolutely. Walmart, IKEA, people. So, as I mentioned in the kind of history piece, there's lots of people apparently doing something for the first time again, but many of these kind of brand activations and engagements with these platforms have happened in some shape or form before. That's not to say they can't happen again, and it's all good. But one of the reasons we produced this monthly digest of all the things that have been going on, not necessarily all the things that are going on, because we produced the digest because so many things are going on, but we try and cover the full breadth of Metaverse. So it's everything from the deepest industrial use case to enterprise B2B, B2C, what consumers are doing, what countries are doing, kind of country level activations of things. Wales has got a visit Wales on the spatial platform as like a tourist guide. So we try and gather all those together and put them along with things like the forecast and the numbers and the other pieces that we're doing to try and get it all in one digestible piece. And if you look at it, you don't often get things like Kung Fu Panda next door to Siemens Industrial Metaverse. That's not what coverage normally is, but we're trying to show that those kind of crossovers, and they are. They exist.
You ever get Kung Fu Panda speaking Welsh? Cruiso to you all.
Cruiso, well done, yes.
It's a limited amount of Welsh, so...
Yeah, and the producer of the Walmart crossover with Roblox was on the show floor. The production company's named Sawhorse. They're kind of a transmedia advertising agency, and they really were at the center of probably was not a new phenomenon, but maybe a growing phenomenon of again, content producers, creative types sort of swirling around this industry, trying to find out how to push maybe more traditional media or retail properties into this new virtual opportunity, particularly to target Gen Z and younger audiences that may be losing or not seeing the entire brand landscape on traditional media.
Well, that opens up some really interesting possibilities, because you've now got viewing environments that are not, you don't have to be entirely headset based. There are other options in terms of how to deliver that. So it seems like that's opening up some opportunities there as well, just in terms of expanding the audience.
There's also the things that are helping people just be able to capture the spaces around them and the things around them in ways other than just a photo. And then they want to be able to share those with people. So there's lots of the Gaussian splats of the world, of which there are many applications to do Gaussian splatting. And we saw a lot of those at the show as well. Help people and brands, for instance, say, well, this is a very accurate model that can be experienced, not just a 3D model. It's an accurate place or thing or shop or product that can then be dropped into a multitude of applications, including all the applications we were just talking about, the kind of software development platforms. And all those things help people kind of understand that that the spatial, to use Apple's word, but the spatial world is something that we respond to as humans, because we are spatial beings. So all that gets assisted by this technology in Gaussian splatting or NERF, but both of which are heavily AI focused. Again, get back, that's not necessarily Gen AI, but it's taking some content and understanding from a few photos how to make a proper 3D environment from that thing. And so, come and join me in my garden kind of thing. You can do that with people. And whilst I love the more fanciful end of the metaverse, where you can be anything and have anything, everyone needs to start and does start in what they know, in the buildings they know, in the places they know, in the products they know. And that's obviously what retail wants to do. They want to sell you the products they know so they can build these experiences, but from what they've already got.
That's a point. In thinking about that journey of ensuring that some of those first steps are into an environment that's identifiable, that people can specifically relate to. I'm curious, is that something where you think that's the best first path? Again, so much of what we've talked about, I think first reactions to Metaverse are a lot of the more fanciful capabilities, but there's so much more that is the practical here and now capabilities that we've got direct access to.
I think everyone starts, whatever you're doing, you start with with that solid base. I mean, if you go in an enterprise and say we're going to do a metaverse thing, everyone will model their office, guaranteed. And then they'll go, oh, well, why have we done that then? Why can't we can fly now? We don't need those desks and panels. But if it's quick to do that, which is becoming quicker because you just scan around with an iPhone and you've got a model and off you go, then people can make that leap quicker and then start finding all the unusual expressive ways that you can use this infinite canvas of infinite things and infinite number of pixels. But I think there's a psychological anchor.
Yeah, Ian and I have this, maybe debate is too strong a word, but if Walmart were to move all of its retail into, quote unquote, the metaverse or virtualize a store, would people be better served or more comfortable in a model of an existing store where they walk around and they might know where things are and then put them into their virtual cart, and then eventually they would be sent those goods physically either by a truck or through the mail, or they go pick them up as they do now if you would order off Walmart? Or would people better be served by a virtual experience where it was easy to grasp all the items in front of you in some more abstract but easily interface that was more easy to manipulate than walking around a store entirely? And that's a debate that these brands and retail presences are going to have, with themselves and with the audience over the next 5-10 years.
It opens up that question of how do you address people's ability to work with that interface? And do you start with something that is maybe familiar, the walking around piece, and clunky, sort of the, point at the thing, drop it in my cart sort of stuff, click here kind of thing? or what's the speed with which you can get them into something that's an easier way to actually get to whatever the goods are, whether or not that happens to be the structure, the environment, the mechanisms they're using. A lot of this is really starting to work with what's the constituency that you're actually trying to address, because some folks are going to be able to grasp some of these mechanisms more rapidly than others. And I guess it's that question of, do you have to do one? Can you do more than one? And how you make decisions around that.
That's back to human interfaces and understanding not just all humans, but the one that's currently engaging with the experience. And again, that's a thing that potentially is a great place again for AI and Gen AI to sit, to respond. And so we're going back to the history of this, to respond to the needs of the pilot in this case, or the consumer, and what are they frustrated by, what's not working for them, and work out what to give them to make it better. And that's not a mad suggestion, because that's what we see in robotics, with collaborative robotics, which we've talked about before, that the robot adjusts to the skill of the person that's engaging with them. And if they can go faster, they go faster. If they're going slower, they'll go slower. Those kind of adaptive things is really the benefit of all this tech. It's to help us, not to help it.
Yeah, I keep getting back to the Clippy model, which is, it looks like you're shopping for pots and pans today.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's good ways and bad ways of doing it on this.
Absolutely true. Well, but again, and you've brought us right back to the beginning. We've done a full 360 here. So much of it is adapting to what is useful for the person that's using the environment at that point. Whether or not it is that heads-up display, shopping for things, so much of this is getting into a point at which it's useful for the human that's actually working this.
Yes, and again, going back to the show, to Augmented World Expo, all the talks, of which there were many, were all being AI transcribed and translated into 144 languages. Live.
Wow. Yep.
So if you had your little, it's, you don't have to have a fancy headset or anything, but you just open your phone up and go and you get the subtitles in your language. It's adjusting to the person. They all bit, you pick the language you want, but it's not a, if you're going to do one or two languages, and then it doesn't care, it just does the law. And that's one of those things with large language model. They're particularly good at those kind of translations, and enough for a conference and for a conversation.
We've gotten to our own Babel fish. Wow.
Yeah, and Ian says there you don't need the headset, and that is true, and that is one of the great parts of a lot of these technologies. They're diffuse across multiple platforms. But the company doing the translation, X-Ray, is selling their own heads-up smart glasses that will do the translation inside the lenses, and this is what a lot of these AR, VR, XR hardware vendors are trying to underline, is that, particularly in this moment, is that this hardware is the ideal platform for Gen AI, in their words. So the headsets see what you see, they get the context of the space around you. So when you ask it a question, it already feeds into it through front-facing cameras or sensors or what have you. And you don't have to give it a long text description. What is this in front of me? Who is that? When's the last time I saw that person? Where's my next direction? Give me some context around the world around me. And so the smart glasses in particular are supposed to be that next turn. Not only do the translations exist and you can access them, they're already being spit into your eyeballs.
We're translating that street sign as you're looking at it. Hang. Well, man, a lot of interesting progress. I will point our listeners at the Metaverse Digest to get the latest and greatest what's going on. But we are at time. I want to thank you both for being on. There's so many more conversations around this to be had. I am sure we'll be having you both back on. But thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you. Been great.
Thanks, Eric.
Never enough time to go as far as we'd like. But that is it for this episode of Next in Tech. And thanks to our audience for staying with us. Thanks to our production team, including Sophie Carr, Gary Sussman, and Kate Asplin on the marketing and events teams, and our agency partner, the 199. I hope you'll join us for our next episode, where we're going to be talking about a cyber issue around hybrid warfare and some of the things that we're taking on. It's actually a a revisiting of a conversation that we had at the RSA conference. I hope you'll join us then, because there is always something next in tech.